I never thought a random night out with friends would turn into one of the most confusing and honestly kind of thrilling weeks of my life. It all started when Max stayed over after the party. And I swear, when he finally looked me dead in the eyes and asked if we could experiment, I was equal parts shocked and intrigued. So let me back up a bit. I'm Jake, and I live in a pretty small apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but cozy enough for one guy who's mostly just trying to keep his plants alive and avoid awkward conversations at work. My social life is usually low-key, weekend beers with friends, maybe a concert here or there. But that night, my friend Sam threw this pretty big house party to celebrate his new job, and I figured, why not? Maybe I'd bump into someone new, or at least have a few laughs. Max was there when I showed up, standing by the kitchen counter, talking with this group of people I didn't know. He's the kind of guy you notice immediately. Tall, with that messy dark hair that looks like it's perpetually windblown, and these intense blue eyes that somehow manage to look both inviting and a little guarded at the same time. I'd seen him around a few times. He works in graphic design at the same company as Sam, but we'd never really talked. I figured, tonight's as good a night as any. We started chatting pretty quickly. Nothing heavy, just the usual party small talk, but there was this easy vibe between us. You know, that kind of connection where words don't feel forced, and you catch yourself smiling more than you expect. Halfway through the night, I realized I was genuinely enjoying his company, and that was unusual for me. As the party wound down, most people started drifting out, but Max and I somehow ended up on my couch, just talking. I don't know what it was. Maybe the way his voice softened when he laughed, or how he kept stealing these glances at me, but something about the night felt different. Comfortable, but electric. Around 3 a.m., he looked at me kind of nervously and said, "Hey, do you mind if I crash here tonight?" I wasn't planning on staying out this late, and I don't really want to trek home alone. I hesitated for a second, but then said, "Yeah, why not?" It felt right at the moment. Fast forward to when we were both settled in my small living room, me half watching some random sci-fi movie, and Max scrolling on his phone. And then he did it. He looked over, eyebrows raised, and said, "Can I ask you something a little out there?" I blinked, a little thrown off. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual but totally curious now. "Would you be open to, experimenting? Like, with us?" His voice was quiet, almost unsure. And that's when my brain completely short-circuited. I didn't know if he meant what I thought he meant. Was this some late-night joke? Was he nervous? Was I reading into it way too much? But the look in his eyes told me this was serious. And honestly, I was way more intrigued than I expected to be. I sat there for a moment, probably staring at him like he was some kind of alien, trying to process what he'd just said. Experiment? With us? My mind was spinning, but I managed to keep my voice steady. Experiment how exactly? I asked, mostly because I wasn't sure if I was supposed to be flattered, confused, or just freak out and say thanks, but no thanks. Max rubbed the back of his neck, the kind of nervous gesture that made him even more endearing. I mean, I guess like seeing if there's something more here, you know, like dating or whatever. He paused, then added, or just exploring, because honestly, I don't really know either. I've never done this before. That last part hit me. I hadn't expected Max to be so vulnerable about it, especially after all the confident vibes he gave off at the party. For some reason, that vulnerability made the whole idea feel less like a weird proposition and more like an honest, raw invitation. I ran a hand through my hair and shrugged. Look, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't see this coming, but I'm not gonna say no just because it's unexpected. I'm curious too. I smiled a little, hoping I didn't sound like a total idiot. Max's face lit up, a mix of relief and something softer, maybe hope. "Really?" "Yeah," I said, feeling more certain than I expected. "We could see where it goes. No pressure. Just figuring things out." He nodded, and for a moment, we just sat there in this quiet space between the fading TV show and the city noises outside my window. It felt like one of those rare moments that sneak up on you, where everything shifts but nothing rushes. The next morning, well, that's when things got even more interesting. I woke up to the sound of Max making coffee in my tiny kitchen. The smell hit me before my eyes even opened fully. I was still half dreaming when he called out, "Morning." Hope you don't mind. I'm a little obsessed with my morning coffee. I grunted a hello and shuffled over, still in my pajamas, and found him fiddling with my outdated coffee machine like it might explode any second. I laughed, and he threw me a grin that made my chest tighten. Over coffee, we started talking more openly than I expected. We swapped stories about our childhoods, our jobs, and even some embarrassing moments, like the time Max accidentally sent a text to his boss complaining about him, only to realize it was a group chat with the entire team. Spoiler, he survived, but it was awkward. It was nice, not just the conversation, but the way it felt natural and unforced. I realized I wanted to know more about this guy who, just hours earlier, had seemed like an enigma. Later that day, after a lazy brunch at a nearby cafe, Max and I walked through the park, the city alive around us with weekend energy. We talked about everything and nothing: music, movies, our favorite spots in the city. I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. Then, right as we were sitting on a bench watching kids chase pigeons, Max turned to me, a little hesitant. "So, about this experimenting thing, what do you want it to mean? Like, are we dating? Are we just hanging out and seeing where it goes? I don't want to mess things up before they even start." I thought about it. The honest answer was, I wasn't quite sure. I'd never really dated a guy before, hadn't even thought about it seriously until now. But something about Max made me want to try. "I guess," I said, "I want to see what happens. No labels unless we want them. Just us, figuring it out together." He smiled, and it was like the sun broke through the clouds for me. Okay, I like that. But of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The next few days were full of little moments where I doubted myself, wondering if I was reading too much into things, worrying about what my friends would think, and trying to figure out if Max felt the same way I did. One night, we finally kissed. It was nothing like the movies. No perfect lighting or sweeping music, but it was real and messy and totally electric. My heart was pounding, and when I looked into his eyes afterward, I saw the same mix of excitement and nervousness reflected back at me. That kiss was a turning point. From then on, things felt different. We were no longer just two guys hanging out. We were two people stepping into something new and uncertain, but choosing to do it together. I won't lie, there were moments where I wanted to run and hide. Moments where I wasn't sure if I was brave enough to keep going. But every time I looked at Max, I remembered why I stayed that night, that question, that spark. So yeah, when Max asked if we could experiment, I never imagined it would turn into this. But honestly, I'm glad he did. Because sometimes, the best things come from the most unexpected questions. After that first kiss, things felt like they were moving at their own pace. Not fast, but definitely forward. Max and I started spending more time together, mostly just ordinary stuff that suddenly felt special, like grabbing coffee on a weekday morning, walking through the neighborhood to check out that new vinyl store, or just crashing at my place watching terrible movies and making fun of the plot holes. But even though things were comfortable, I could tell Max was holding back a little. Not because he wasn't interested, but because I think he was figuring out his own boundaries. I guess when you're trying something new, it's a delicate dance, trying to be close without rushing, being honest without oversharing too soon. One evening, about a week after the party, we were on my couch with takeout and a game controller between us. I was kicking his ass in some retro video game, which was a surprise even to me. Max was laughing and complaining about how unfair it was, and it felt like one of those perfect moments that don't need to be scripted. Then, out of nowhere, Max got quiet, staring off into the distance. "Jake?" he said. "Yeah? I've been thinking about something. About us." I paused the game, sensing this wasn't just casual conversation. "Okay." He fiddled with the sleeve of his sweatshirt, the kind of nervous tick I'd come to recognize. I know I said I wanted to just experiment, see where things go without pressure, but honestly, I think I want more. I want to know if this could be serious. I felt my chest tighten, not because I was scared, but because I realized I felt the exact same way and had been too scared to say it first. I'm glad you said that, I told him, because I was thinking the same thing. We smiled at each other, that easy, shy kind of smile that makes you feel like you're the only two people in the world. There was still so much unknown ahead, but in that moment it felt like maybe we were on the right path. But just as things were settling into a comfortable rhythm, reality decided to throw a curveball. A few days later, I bumped into Sam at work, and after the usual, "How's it going?" small talk, he asked me about Max. I wasn't sure if he meant casually or if he was fishing for something, but I figured honesty was the best policy. "So, you and Max? What's the story there?" Sam asked, tilting his head with a smirk. I swallowed, feeling my cheeks heat up. "We're seeing where it goes, just experimenting," like he said. Sam raised an eyebrow. "Experimenting, huh? Sounds serious." I shrugged, trying to sound casual, but inside I was nervous. "Yeah, I guess it's turning into something more." Sam nodded slowly, like he was processing something. Then, with a grin, he said, "Good for you, man. You deserve to be happy." That moment gave me a bit of confidence, but it also made me realize how much my own insecurities were getting in the way. I hadn't told many people about Max and me, mostly because I wasn't sure how to explain it to myself. Later that night, Max and I were sitting on my fire escape, the city lights twinkling below. He looked over at me and asked, "Do you think telling people will make this easier or harder?" I thought about it. "Probably both," I admitted. "But I think being honest with ourselves is the first step." He nodded, then surprised me by reaching over and grabbing my hand. "I'm glad we're doing this together." We sat there for a while, just holding hands and watching the world go by. That night felt like a quiet promise between us. Not just about what we were, but who we were willing to be for each other. But it wasn't all smooth sailing after that. The more time we spent together, the more I started noticing the little cracks that come with any new relationship. There were moments when Max would get distant, like something was bothering him but he didn't want to say. And I found myself wondering if I was doing enough, or if I was stepping on toes I didn't even know existed. One afternoon, after a day that had been especially quiet between us, I finally pushed. We were in my apartment, and I was trying not to overthink every word. "Hey," I said, looking at him. "Is something up? You've been kinda off." Max sighed, then admitted, "I guess I'm scared. Scared of messing this up. Scared of what people might think. Scared of, I don't know, being vulnerable." I nodded, because honestly, I felt the same way. "Me too, but I think it's okay to be scared. We don't have to have it all figured out." He looked at me like maybe I just said the smartest thing he'd heard all week. "Thanks, Jake. That means a lot." From that day on, things slowly got better. We stopped pretending everything was perfect and started being real with each other. We talked about our fears, our hopes, and even the dumb little things that made us happy. And you know what? It made all the difference. I still don't know exactly where this is going or what experimenting means in the long run. But I do know that when Max asked me that question, it opened a door to something I didn't even realize I was ready for. Sometimes the best experiments are the ones you don't plan for, and the ones that end up teaching you the most about yourself. A couple of weeks after that heart-to-heart, Max invited me to this little art gallery opening he was helping organize. It was one of those local, indie spots tucked away in a part of Brooklyn I barely knew existed, with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. Honestly, it wasn't my usual scene, but Max was clearly excited, and I wanted to be there for him. We arrived just as the crowd was starting to swell. Max was in his element, moving between guests, chatting confidently, his usual guarded vibe replaced by something warmer. Watching him, I felt this surge of pride and something else, something I was still getting used to. Genuine affection. At one point, he pulled me aside into this tiny back room, away from the buzz. The walls were plastered with posters of neon colors and abstract shapes, and the faint hum of the party leaked in through the door. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice softer now. "It means a lot." I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Wouldn't miss it. This place is cool, by the way." He smiled, then his expression shifted like he was debating whether to say something. Finally, he blurted out, "I'm glad we're figuring this out together. I've never felt this way before. So, comfortable." I felt my heart skip. "Me too," I admitted. It's weird, but in a good way. Max reached for my hand, fingers intertwining with mine. That simple touch made everything else fade. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. But then, as if reality decided to remind us of itself, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his face tightened ever so slightly. "Sorry, that's my roommate," he said, slipping the phone away quickly. "Probably asking when I'm coming home." I nodded, but the sudden shift made the mood feel fragile. I knew Max lived with a roommate, but I hadn't thought much about what that meant for us. Later, as we walked out onto the street, the city lights casting long shadows, I asked, "So how's the living situation? Are you comfortable, with all this?" Max hesitated. "It's complicated. My roommate's great, but he's pretty traditional. I haven't told him about us yet. I'm still figuring out how to handle that." I could tell it weighed on him more than he wanted to admit. "If you want, I can help, or at least support you. No pressure." He smiled, this time genuine and relieved. "Thanks, Jake. That means a lot." That night, as I walked him to the subway station, I realized how much I wanted to be there for him. Not just the easy, fun parts, but the messy, vulnerable stuff too. The days that followed were a mix of ups and downs. We kept discovering new things about each other, like how Max is obsessed with old-school jazz records, or how I have an irrational fear of deep water. We cooked dinner together, danced in my tiny kitchen to songs I never thought I'd like, and argued good-naturedly about which pizza place was the city's best. But with the good came challenges. Sometimes Max would get quiet out of nowhere, or I'd catch him staring off like something was bothering him. I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to push. Then, one Thursday afternoon, out of the blue, Max called me sounding tense. "Can you come over? I need to talk." I dropped everything and headed to his place. When I got there, the usual warm, cozy vibe was replaced by this thick tension I couldn't ignore. He invited me in, but then stopped at the door, looking like he was about to say something huge. "Jake, I've been offered a promotion at work," he started, voice shaky. "It means moving to the headquarters in Seattle." I blinked. "Seattle?" "Yeah, it's a big deal for me career-wise, but it's a lot to process with everything else going on." I felt this knot twist in my stomach. Part of me was thrilled for him, but another part was terrified about what that meant for us. "Wow, that's amazing, Max. But yeah, definitely a lot to think about." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want to lose what we have. I'm scared this will mess everything up." I stepped closer, putting a hand on his arm. "Hey, whatever happens, we'll figure it out, long distance or not. We're in this together, right?" He looked relieved, like I had just lifted some weight off his chest. "Right?" he said, managing a small smile. Over the next few days, we talked non-stop about fears, plans, the possibility of visits, or even me visiting him. It was overwhelming, but also kind of exciting, like we were writing a new chapter. One evening, as we sat tangled on my couch, Max looked up at me and said quietly, "This experiment, it's turned into the best thing I didn't expect." I smiled back. "Yeah, me too." Neither of us knew exactly what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It felt like an adventure we'd take together, one step at a time. The weeks leading up to Max's potential move were weirdly intense. We found ourselves caught in this strange space, excited about the future but also painfully aware of the ticking clock. It wasn't like one of us was packing bags tomorrow, but the weight of that possibility made everything feel more urgent. One Sunday afternoon, Max invited me over to his place. The neighborhood felt quieter than usual, the kind of lazy city calm that makes you want to just sit and soak it all in. When I got inside, his apartment was basically the same as before. Posters on the walls, a few paint-splattered canvases leaning in the corner, but something about the air felt heavier. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, headphones around his neck, staring at the screen like he was wrestling with something. I poured us both coffee and sat down across from him. "Everything okay?" I asked. Max sighed, closing the laptop and rubbing his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about the move. What it means, for me, for us." I nodded, trying to hold back the swirl of emotions inside me. "Yeah, me too." He leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. I don't want this to be a goodbye, and I don't want us to just fade out because of distance, but I'm scared I won't be able to handle being away from you. That hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to say all the right things, but honestly, I was scared too. I wasn't sure if I was ready for long distance or what that would do to what we had. I reached across and squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out. Maybe it won't be perfect, but it's worth trying. He looked at me, eyes shining with something like hope and relief. Thanks, Jake. That means more than I can say. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking through all the what-ifs, visiting schedules, video calls, how we'd keep connected. It was exhausting, but also kind of beautiful, like we were building a bridge between two cities out of sheer will. A few days later, I found myself at my usual coffee shop, staring at my phone and waiting for Max to text me back. He'd been quiet all day, and my mind was doing that annoying thing where it jumped to the worst-case scenarios. When his message finally popped up, just a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" my heart did this weird flip. We met that evening at my place. Max looked pale, like he'd been running on empty. "I'm sorry," he said without preamble. "I got called into a surprise meeting today. The move might happen sooner than we thought." I blinked, the news hitting me like a punch in the gut. Sooner? Like, when? Possibly next week. I couldn't stop the breath from catching in my throat. Suddenly, all the plans we'd been making felt like they were slipping through my fingers. "Are you okay with that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though inside I was anything but. He shrugged, a sad smile tugging at his lips. "I want to be, but it's scary. I'm scared." I moved closer, wrapping my arms around him. "I'm scared too, but we're not alone in this." That night, we stayed up talking until the city outside our windows went silent. We made plans to pack, to say goodbye to the neighborhood spots that had become ours, to hold on to each other even when miles stretched between us. On the day Max left, I drove him to the airport in silence. Neither of us said much, just held on to the moment. When it was time to say goodbye, Max pulled me into one last hug. "This isn't the end, Jake. Promise me that." I looked into his eyes, feeling that familiar nervous excitement mixed with a deep ache. "Promise." As the plane took off, I realized that the experiment Max had asked about weeks ago wasn't just about trying something new. It was about being brave enough to open up, to risk getting hurt, and to discover what love could be when you let it in, even if the path isn't straight. And honestly, I'm still figuring it out. But I'm glad I said yes to the experiment, because sometimes the best parts of life come from the questions you never saw coming. The first week without Max was, well, it was hard. Not just the obvious stuff, the empty spot on my couch, the sudden quiet in my apartment, but the way my mind kept replaying every moment, every laugh, every touch. I caught myself reaching for my phone, half expecting a message from him, and then realizing, no, he was hours away, building a new life halfway across the country. We tried to keep things alive with late-night calls and texts, but it wasn't the same. The time difference, work stress, and the fact that neither of us had done the long-distance thing before made every conversation feel both precious and brittle. I remember one night, about 4 days in, I called him just to hear his voice before bed. He picked up, sounding tired but happy to talk. "How's Seattle?" I asked. "Busy." "Cold," he said, with a laugh. Then his voice softened. "I miss you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I miss you too." That was the first time I said it out loud, and it felt like admitting it made it real in a way I hadn't been ready for. But as much as we tried, the distance started to pull at the edges of what we had. There were missed calls, delayed replies, and moments when one of us would fall silent, overwhelmed by the miles and uncertainty. One evening, about 2 weeks after Max left, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw a message from him that made my heart skip. "Can we talk tomorrow? It's important." I stared at it for a while, nerves twisting in my stomach. When the time came, we hopped on a video call, the screen glowing between us like a fragile thread connecting two worlds. "I've been thinking a lot," Max started, eyes searching mine. "This move, it's bigger than I thought. Not just work, but everything. I'm starting to realize how much I want you close." My heart pounded. "Me too." He hesitated, then took a deep breath. I'm thinking about asking if I can transfer back, or at least work remotely more often. I don't want to lose this. I felt this rush of relief and hope burst through me. That sounds amazing. I want that too. For the first time since he left, the future didn't seem so uncertain. It was still messy and complicated, but it felt like we were both willing to fight for it. Over the next few days, Max dove into making those calls, writing emails, and figuring out logistics. Meanwhile, I kept busy with work and friends, but my mind was mostly with him, thinking about the next time I'd see him, planning what we'd do. Then came the day when Max told me the good news. His company agreed to let him work remotely for a while. I remember reading his text in my coffee shop and nearly dropping my cup. We celebrated that night over a clumsy video call, grinning like idiots and making plans for him to visit soon. When Max finally came back to Brooklyn, it was different this time. We weren't just two guys figuring things out. We were two people who had been through the fire, tested by distance, still standing. Our reunion was awkward and sweet. At the airport, I nearly tripped over my own feet trying to catch him in a hug. The moment we saw each other, all the miles and uncertainties melted away, replaced by this overwhelming rush of relief and joy. That night, back at my apartment, we stayed up talking until the early morning, sharing stories about the weeks apart, laughing at the little mishaps, and making new promises. But even with the excitement, there were still moments of doubt. I worried about the logistics, about whether we could really make this work long term. Max had his own fears too, about balancing his career and our relationship. One night, as we lay tangled in my bed, Max looked at me with those intense blue eyes and said, "Jake, I don't want to lose you. This isn't easy for me, but I'm all in if you are." I smiled, feeling all the nerves and excitement swirl inside me. I'm in, no matter what. We were far from perfect, and the road ahead was anything but clear. But for the first time, I felt like we were in this together. Not just experimenting anymore, but building something real. And honestly, that's a terrifying and beautiful thing to say. Months passed after Max's return, and little by little, we settled into a rhythm that felt more like a partnership than just two people trying to figure things out. It wasn't always perfect. There were still moments when work got in the way, or when the past insecurities crept back. But we learned how to talk through the bumps instead of letting them pull us apart. One evening, we were sitting on my fire escape, the city skyline glowing in the distance. Max had his head on my shoulder, and I could feel the steady beat of his heart, the same steady beat that had become my anchor over these months. "You know," he said quietly, "when I first asked to experiment, I had no idea where it would take me." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Neither did I." He turned to look at me, eyes reflecting the lights of the city. "But I'm really glad I asked." "Me too," I said, "because what we have, it's not an experiment anymore. It's real." There was this soft silence between us, comfortable and full of meaning. I realized just how much I'd grown, not just in how I felt about Max, but about myself. I'd taken a chance on something uncertain, pushed past my fears, and found something worth holding on to. That night, as we went inside and made dinner together, laughing at our clumsy attempts at cooking, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: contentment. It wasn't a perfect fairy tale, but it was ours. Messy, honest, and real. And honestly, that was more than enough. Looking back, I'm grateful for that night at the party when Max stayed over, and for the moment he asked if we could experiment. Because sometimes, the most unexpected questions open the door to the most meaningful answers. Sometimes, love doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's just two people choosing each other, again and again, even when they don't have all the answers. And that, to me, feels pretty perfect.